Great to have you with us. Please like, subscribe, and share. Now let's check this out. JD Vance had a from all intents and purposes, an excellent visit in India. And this smacks of exactly what President Trump has been doing with his tariff policy and with the attempt to isolate China from the rest of the world, or at least from other major trading partners, by essentially walling them off and boxing them off. And Trump is getting it done with the help of his staff, with the help of the U.S. Trade Representative, Lutnick, Besson, and others. And in this particular case, it was JD Vance and his wife traveling to visit Modi after Modi had been one of the first people to come visit Trump in the Oval Office. But check this out.
You're aware, both of our governments are hard at work on a trade agreement built on shared priorities, like creating new jobs, building durable supply chains, and achieving prosperity for our workers. In our meeting yesterday, Prime Minister Modi and I made very good progress on all of those points. And we are especially excited to formally announce that America and India have officially finalized the terms of reference for the trade negotiation. I think this is a vital step. Thank you. I believe this is a vital step toward realizing President Trump's and Prime Minister Modi's vision, because it sets a roadmap toward a final deal between our nations. You're aware, both of our governments are hard at work on a trade agreement built on shared priorities, like creating new jobs, building durable.
That is very important. I wanted you to hear that. The fact that they have now they've gotten to the point of having essentially a reference document. This is very much for anybody who's been in business, like an LOI, letter of intent, binding letter of intent, whatever you want to call it. And what it does is it sets forth the parameters to begin negotiations for a trade deal, but essentially boxes everybody in so that we're not beginning from nothing. We're beginning from a set of shared agreement. Yes, these are the guardrails. This is where we need to negotiate within. So it drastically reduces the time to reach actual final agreements, and it streamlines everything. So hopefully, and why this is so important is because India could absolutely become the next China in the relationship that we had with China, where China was making a lot of the low-priced materials. India could fill that gap, but could do so without all of the other issues that China brings. India is not our greatest adversary. China is. India is not necessarily spying on the U.S. and trying to compete with us militarily. China is. India is not trying to invade its nearest neighbor like China is with Taiwan. You've got all those issues. India is much friendlier to the United States. Plus, we, as you would listen to Kevin O'Leary, we can litigate in Indian courts. We can prevent the theft of IP. There's all those beneficial aspects to an Indian partnership. They are much more closely aligned with America than China ever has been. China was basically an outsourced manufacturing source, but we had very little other relationship with China on the world stage. We were adversaries everywhere else. With India, we can change that. And I think this is huge because this puts a huge layer of added pressure on China, because now China is not the only cheap manufacturing game in town. If that's really what the U.S. wants, if that's what the U.S. consumer market wants, is cheap manufacturing, India can fit the bill. Their wages are only slightly higher than China's would be. Now, as much as I dislike all of that, I want, if we're paying our workers here a decent wage, then we can't be outsourcing manufacturing to any country that's paying slave wages. So I want that all to go away. But given that, if I had the choice of, outsourcing very cheap manufacturing to China or India, I'll take India any day of the week. And this puts pressure because China is no longer the only game in town. This is fantastic stuff. Now, also listen to Kevin O'Leary as he talks about what's going on with the trade deals. We're getting closer with a lot of this stuff. That's why you see the market up big today, because partially with this India announcement by JD Vance, some of the other things, the market will stabilize as soon as we get one or two of these trade deals done. And I love what Kevin O'Leary said. Focus on one and get it done and let the others fall like dominoes. But that first one will absolutely stabilize the market because it will verify the model. Check this out.
Dow is on course for the worst April since 1932. The US dollar hit a 3-year low, bond yields are up. Are you still chalking this up to short-term volatility in the market?
Yeah, because nothing's been resolved since we last talked. I mean, we've got news a few hours ago about India agreeing to terms of negotiation. I think what has to happen, three things to stabilize the markets. Number one is pick any deal and get it done, whether it's India, EU, England, Canada, Mexico. Just pick one and get it done, and that'll be the roadmap for all the other deals, and show that these trade negotiations can be successfully initiated and completed. That's for the 70% of.
That is so important. In any new business venture, the most important thing is the first contract, because it sets the tone and it proves that it can be done. Above anything, even if it's not the greatest deal in the world, it proves that you can complete a deal and you can refine things moving forward, and you can push harder around the edges moving forward. You can push for better deals even moving forward. Absolutely get the first deal done, and that will 100% stabilize the markets. It'll begin to galvanize all of the American public that isn't behind Trump. It'll start to focus things now into, yes, we can do this. Now let's do it 10 more times, 20 more times, 30 more times, and on and on and on. And the faster that it goes, without China coming to the table, the more China gets isolated and the better it gets for everybody. Let's keep going.
Of the trade deals, which include, if you think about EU, England, Switzerland, Roche just announced a $50 billion investment in the U.S. manufacturing. A lot of this stuff is happening, but it's fluid and it's not concluded. And then Canada and Mexico, that would be about 72% of the trade done with the United States. And then on the second pivot is the China thing, which is completely different, because China is not just about tariffs. It's really a full blown out economic war. And it's got to get resolved because China has not complied with the WTO since 2000. It's got IP theft all over it, and people are unhappy about that. There's a new SEC chair who's threatening to delist all the Chinese companies because they're not compliant with GAAP, and U.S. companies are compliant and have to pay for those compliant costs. The Chinese are not paying. So all of these disputes have to get resolved, far more complicated. And lastly, there's a lot of job owning about the Fed, which is always an independent body. The executive, in this case Trump, every executive job owns the Fed, trying to get them to lower rates when it's politically expedient. It never works. The market doesn't want that. So that's kind of noise, really, but it's still causing some volatility. So those three.
Absolutely, I agree with him. Get the first deal done and then isolate China, because China is a different animal. China is not about resolving tariffs. China is about resolving the economic war and the fact that they have not complied with the WTO, the fact that we cannot litigate in their courts, the fact that they steal our IP, the fact that they turn around and compete with American businesses with cheap slave labor. It's not just that they're making product and outsourcing manufacturing jobs. They do that first. And then against the businesses that have given them business in terms of building their product, they turn around, replicate it, and sell it back into the same market, undercutting the business themselves. They are completely and utterly unethical in their business practices, and it needs to stop. Either they come right and adhere to the WTO or kick them out, or essentially, even if you don't kick them out, completely isolate them from the rest of the world stage, and then watch their economy flounder until they come to the table. That's what I think. Now, we have one more segment because Caroline Levitt was talking about some of these same things and the fact that they have gotten a whole bunch of actual in-writing proposals now. So let's check this out, because I believe this is moving in a direction where they will get the first deal done, and then you will get a rapid domino effect of probably 5 to 15 follow-on deals, and that will absolutely change the perception around everything that's going on with trade. And suddenly Trump will have a huge boost in political capital to do some of the other things that he needs, which, like Congress is working on right now, we need to get the big, beautiful bill passed. Let's go.
Spoke to our entire trade team this morning. There is a lot of progress being made. We now have 18 proposals on paper that have been brought to the trade team. Again, these are proposals on paper that countries have proposed to the Trump administration and to our government. You have Secretary Bessent, Secretary Lutnick, Ambassador Greer, NEC Director Hassett, and Peter Navarro, the entire trade team, meeting with 34 countries this week alone. We are moving at Trump speed to ensure these deals are made on behalf of the American worker and the American people. And just yesterday, it seemed to get a little bit lost in the news, and I think it's a disservice to the American public that it did. The Vice President announced terms of reference for a trade deal with India. That is a big deal. We know when we look at the numbers, the monetary trade barriers and the non-monetary trade barriers from India, they have been ripping off the United States and American workers for a very long time. So the fact that the Vice President, with Prime Minister Modi, on that trip in India, announced these terms of reference, which is essentially a framework to move the ball forward to sign a good trade deal between our two nations, is great progress, and it speaks to the work ethic and the real labor that's being put into this effort by the president's trade team.
I love what the president is doing. I love that Trump is absolutely taking on the world and saying, no, we will not be everybody's patsy anymore. We are the greatest consumer nation on the planet. We have 39% of all global consumption. He who owns the gold makes the rules. If everybody remembers Aladdin, the movie, he who has the gold makes the rules. And as the greatest consumer market on the planet, we have the gold that all those manufacturing nations need. And so we need to absolutely dictate what happens. That means there needs to be free trade back and forth. So zero tariffs, zero economic barriers on both sides, with the exception that there is a price to access our market. It's one of two things. It's either 10%, that's the seller's fee. You pay a 10% tariff in order to access our markets, or you bypass that by making your product in the United States. Hence, Apple bringing manufacturing back, Taiwan Semiconductor building a multi-billion dollar plant and more in Arizona. Roche just announced $50 billion. SoftBank announcing $100+ billion investments. All these investments to drive manufacturing in the United States of America. And then our spearheading AI to allow that manufacturing, even though we don't have cheap slave wages here, allowing that manufacturing to be highly productive and highly profitable at overall costs that mimic some of these less developed economies without simply paying people cheap, ridiculous, $5, $10 a day wages. So it allows us to then dictate overall global trade with productivity, with cost effectiveness, but driving high dollar jobs here in America and allowing us to see significant wage growth in America, which means that our consumer position in the world would even grow more beyond that, because the higher wages get in America, as our population grows and those wages keep going up, we will continue to grab consumer market share. It won't go down, certainly. It may stay the same, but it will certainly not fall off a cliff. And that's what we want, because it'll maintain our global leadership as the world economy. And that will allow us to then start paying off debt. These trade deficits will go away to the tune of $1 trillion a year. So with the economy humming, we can expect another GOP president for the next 8 years. And we can expect, with Doge doing what they're doing, with the big, beautiful bill, the supply side stimulus driving economic activity, along with deregulation, and then the leveling of trade barriers around the world, and the collection of sellers' fees and or repatriation of manufacturing, we will see a booming U.S. economy that we can begin to pay off our national debt to the tune of $1 trillion a year or more, which will allow us to then, if we could, over the next 8 years, between the gold card, between everything else that's going on, if we can pay off half of that debt and refinance the rest at lower interest rates, the American economy will get rid of the giant boat anchor that interest payment is. It'd be absolutely fantastic. Talk about flying. Talk about an upward spiral. Up and to the right. That's what we need. Hey, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate everybody rolling up. Please smash that like button. Like, subscribe, comment, and most importantly, please share the Chris Highland Show with everybody that you know. Remember, God is good and He is sovereign. It'll all be good in the end. Until I catch you next time.